Oliver, we should never quarrel. Never let me feel jealousy or anger. Whatever is in me is held in, is kept harmless when I'm happy.
You see, I've never believed your story. I'm not afraid of you. I take you in my arms. So little, so soft. This warm perfume in your hair, your body. Don't be afraid of me, Irena.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Bears Presents The Bear Cave of Terror. I'm your hairy heavy homo and horror fan host, Steve Morey. Each week here in the Bear Cave, I invite a horror-loving guest who brings with them one of their favorite scary movies. It can be classic, gory, trashy, obscure, covered in cat hair, or something still banned in Britain. In other words, a thrilling work of cinematic terror that we think you might enjoy. In each episode, we'll dig into the flesh and bone of the film, highlighting our favorite scary moments, as well as stories and details from beyond the screen. All while our guest imparts their deep and possibly concerning love for this week's frightful vision unto you, our dear listener. And joining me again in the Bear Cave is Mr. Rob Staeger. Rob, thank you so much for coming back and talking with me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. This is so much fun to do.
It is. I love doing this. This is so much fun. I love talking to people about movies they love. It's so much fun. And sometimes the movie that we talk about is one that I've never seen. And this, is the opportunity for me to actually go and watch it and find out what all the fuss is about and try and, understand why my guest loves it so much. And I have to say, thank you for suggesting this because I think this movie is fantastic. And the fact that it is probably the oldest movie that we've talked about in this podcast so far. Someday we might talk about some older ones, but this one is currently the reigning champion at like 82 years. It is or 84 years now, 84 years, and it is a beautiful example of early mid 20th century filmmaking put out by a little studio that we don't have anymore called RKO Pictures and produced by a gentleman named Val Lewton, who went on to produce quite a bit of horror films and other genre films for RKO Pictures. And that is 1942's Catpeople. And people might actually, know that title maybe in association with the 1982 remake, or, well, I guess spiritual remake of a sort. Some people might, remember that, the 1982 version with Natasha Kinski and Malcolm McDowell playing the titular cat people. But this is the original one. This is the one that inspired that. It's very cool. So tell us what this movie is about.
In Catpeople, Simone, a French actress, is starring as Irena, a Serbian immigrant who, at the beginning of the movie, meets Oliver Reed, played by Kent Smith. His name is Oliver Reed, which is an actor's name, and that's so weird.
It is.
And yet, they meet, they start to have a romance, and yet, even as that romance progresses, she explains to him vaguely at first, but then it seems to be even more specific that they can't really kiss or have any sort of romantic physical affection for each other because she will turn into a cat and a panther and kill.
And which is pretty normal, right? That's a normal conversation to have with a prospective romantic partner.
Yeah. You put that stuff in the prenup and then it's all handled. But the relationship progresses anyway from a second date where he inexplicably buys her a kitten, which is kind of a red flag, I think, but But he does it. Then later on, they get married, and like something mysterious kind of happens at the wedding dinner where they're at a Serbian restaurant that has these creepy cat heads out in front of it in the snow. A woman just stands up and looks at Irena and says, "Moja sestra." Moja sestra, which means my sister, or just sister, is what she says. And it is this moment of recognition that they've already, like, other people at the table had sort of commented that this woman who was dining alone looks like a cat, which, I mean, I guess sort of. She has a bow in her hair that resembles cat ears in the same sort of way that maybe Anne Hathaway's goggles at some point resembled cat ears in that Batman movie she was in.
Yeah. Dark Knight Rises, I believe it was. Yeah.
But as things go along, Oliver and Irena just aren't making the marriage work, and Oliver is becoming more and more attractive to his work wife, Alice. And at a certain point, jealousy gets involved, and Irena starts stalking Alice from work through dark tunnel-like overpasses, I guess, or underpasses, and into her hotel pool. And those are the two best known scenes of Cat People, I would say, are the stalking through the underpass and then the circling around the pool while Alice is treading water in the center of the pool, knowing that cats don't like water and trying to keep herself safe that way. Eventually, things come to a head between Alice, Oliver, Irena, and a psychiatrist that gets pulled into this, Dr. Judd, who is kind of
a creep.
A creep. That's a good way. That's a good way to say it. And the cat comes out.
Yeah.
And not everyone is left standing at the end.
So that perfect summary of this. It's a relatively short movie, so things tend to happen pretty quickly. So the romance happens pretty quickly. I mean, like you said, you have the first date. They meet in the zoo. She's sketching the panther that's there on display that she has an inexplicable drawn sort of some kind of spiritual camaraderie with. Well, they go from the zoo to her place immediately, which that was shocking to me. I'm like, 1942, she's already inviting him up to her place.
Yep.
But he has to go by dinner time, like 6 o'clock is too late.
But it gets dark. It is dark.
Well, it's also it's winter time.
It's winter.
I'm assuming, in New York City, so it gets dark early. But so he has to go. But she's already kind of like opened up sort of her national trauma to him at this point by revealing this sort of legend of this great saint who rode into her ancestral village and banished all of the witches and the pagans who were worshiping evil deities and banished them into the woods. And the ones that went into the woods became cat people. Their dark and twisted souls and sinful nature sort of twisted them into shapeshifters, into people who could become deadly cats. And so that is why she can't ever kiss a man, because if she did, she fears that she will become a cat person, that she's one of them, or that she's descended from them.
She has a statue in her apartment that is kind of a reminder of that, and it is that saint, King John, actually is
King John.
That's King John of Serbia, and he is holding a sword up into the air, and on that sword a panther is impaled.
What a lovely little conversation piece that you have in your sitting room. But he doesn't take the hint, and he decides that he's going to be continuing this romance. So he buys her a cat, which again, red flag. Like, nobody, don't buy a living creature, especially not something with a lot of responsibility attached to it. She continues to fall for him, and they fall for each other. They actually do, have a very quick whirlwind romance, but one that seems centered around the actual affection that they do share, especially because Oliver knows that it can never be a physical relationship. And he seems to be, at least at the beginning, okay with that. And, however that does end up, I mean, obviously they do appear on the surface to be a very loving couple. I love his relationship with his work wife. I love Alice and his relationship, especially in the beginning, because they're friends, they're colleagues, they're buddies. They joke around, they take pot shots at each other. It's what you kind of expect in a more contemporary film, like a more modern film, than in a film from the 1940s where you don't usually see sort of men and women just being buddies and being equals in the workplace. And that's what this is. She's not a secretary. She's another draftsperson. They both work in a shipbuilding, ship designing office. So everybody has like a funny nickname for the boss, who's the Commodore, because he's the one who runs the shipbuilding office and the designing office. But they all seem to have like a really good working relationship. Unfortunately, it does take a turn after Oliver becomes frustrated with the relationship with Irena.
Which part of that frustration, I think, comes at a pivotal point where he had recommended that she go to see a psychiatrist.
Right.
And when she comes back from the psychiatrist, she sees him and Alice sitting together and talking about it and talking about the psychiatrist and asking how it went. And she's like, this was our private deal. This is our business. This isn't her business. And Oliver's like, but she was the one who gave me his name. I had to reach out to someone.
She's my best friend, basically. Like this woman is my best friend. We tell each other everything. And Irena's like,
yeah.
And probably because she's their entire relationship, the intimacy that she and Oliver have, because it can't be physical, it has to be, very much a domestic space. So everything that happens within the home is their private business. She can't stand the fact that there's somebody else. And I don't necessarily think that it's just because Alice is a woman here that she feels that way. I think it becomes that because obviously things progress a little bit more along that line. But I think just the fact that their business is no longer just between them, that somebody else knows about it, that breaks her trust in Oliver. And that's kind of the start of the drop. The precipitous drop into fully becoming a Panther person. But yeah, and I love Alice as a character. I think she's very realistic. I think she's well written, and you do feel the tension. You feel the fear that she has when she's being stalked later on. And that's really cool. And it's a lot of it is kind of like misconceptions and assumptions that Irena's making that are not true, but then are revealed to be true because Alice is like, actually, I'm kind of in love with Oliver and kind of feels the same way about me. And we're both very open about our feelings. Yeah. Sorry, Irena.
But the one thing that she isn't, that I would have expected her to be, is duplicitous about it. She really doesn't seem to be operating behind the scenes or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, I love you. It kind of slips out almost. It's just like,
it's matter of fact. It's
it's like,
I have these feelings. You don't have to reciprocate. Like, I know you're married, like you have this relationship, but I just want to let you know. And, I'm not going to be ashamed about it. I'm just going to say like, this is how I feel. And it's like, what year is this? What did this? Who wrote this stuff? This is fantastically modern. Like, this is not something you would expect in a United States that's at war. This is not the kind of social message that you would normally get in a movie like this or in this time period.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a lot to love about this movie. The characters are really great. Dr. Judd is a fucking creep. I can't put it simply. He's just like slimiest jerk. And I blame him as much for what happens to Irena as just her own fears and insecurities. Like, he is.
And that's the one thing about Alice is she recommends him. And that's the one thing where it's like, well, maybe this is a little shady because, like, she says when she comes back, it's like, Dr. Judd, I mean, like, sometimes he makes me want to spit cotton, which I don't understand what that phrase means. But it definitely means that she knows something's hinky with him, It definitely is not like he's entirely on the up and up. She just either also thinks she can help Irena, or, although there's really no other evidence for that, it's part of a Machiavellian plan to get Irena out. And I don't really see that.
Drive her crazy with this absolute garbage human being, and then she'll be out of the picture because she'll be in an asylum somewhere.
Yeah.
I think like his character of all the characters, really deserves what he gets at the end. And even still, he's very selfish in what is happening. He thinks she's nuts, and he's going to sexually assault her to prove that she's nuts. Like, it is the most horrific plan.
Yeah.
You know, he knows that he's putting her in this position where it's like, it's almost, you either prove that you're crazy and that you don't really believe that you turn into a cat person, and I'm going to do this by sexually assaulting you, and therefore you are then mine, or I dose you up with something in a syringe and I stick you in a home somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are your choices. And even Oliver, given sort of like the on the surface choice of like, well, either I help her get better to see the error of her ideas, or we put her in a home. Oliver's like, if I put her in a home, then I will remain responsible for her. Like, I am not going to divorce her.
Yeah.
Which is,
and
everybody else in this seems pretty virtuous, except for the doctor.
Except for the doctor. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, oh, wow, it would suck to put her in an asylum because obviously she doesn't need to be. She is clearly, yes, she becomes homicidal, but at the same time, she is right.
Yeah. It's not a mental problem she has. She has a curse. It's
a supernatural problem.
Yeah, it's a supernatural problem.
Let's kind of talk about that, because we mentioned a little bit before the show talking about her, like the scary moments, the scary scenes in this film. The most famous ones are where she's stalking Alice. She's stalking her through the streets, and she's stalking her. I thought it was a YWCA. I wasn't sure if it was a hotel or something. It was some kind of club that she belongs to. That also has a gym and a swimming pool. But those are, they're beautifully shot. They're wonderfully designed. The meaning behind it might be a little bit different if you see Irena's sort of attraction to Alice a little bit differently than just jealousy and just wanting to scare her.
Yeah.
That there could be something more there.
Yeah, there could be. And if physical arousal is what brings out the cat in Irena, the cat in Irena comes out around Alice and not Oliver. So that
by representation.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
What? That's a pretty fair point to make in the way that she's portrayed here. And I don't know much about Simone, who's portraying her, like if she, had any queer sensibilities, but Hollywood had this undercurrent. There were plenty of actors that were closeted or had like open sexualities privately. And this kind of, I can get that feeling too. Like when you mentioned, I was like, yeah, I can kind of see it. It is, it's tied inextricably to her sexuality and her passion. And yet there's only two people where she really brings it out. Doesn't bring it out around Oliver.
No. No.
She brings it around Alice and then Dr. Judd, and Dr. Judd deserves what happens to him because he forces it upon her.
Yeah. With Dr. Judd, it is definitely a matter of her letting it happen. Her saying, oh no, well, here we go then. Cause I'm not fighting this right now. It's time to just cat out.
Yeah. Yeah. Let the cat out of the bag. I'm not calling her a bag. She ain't no bag. She's a beautiful woman.
Yes, she is. There were, although I heard some rumors about Simone, like that were just generally discounted as I was listening to the commentary track on this. They had nothing to do with her sexuality, but one rumor was that she had a pet panther that she walked on a leash. This is not true.
Good. Phew.
This is not true, but there, I believe, is a publicity photo of her doing that at some point when she was answering questions for a publicist about what's your favorite this and that and all sorts of things. She just got tired of it and she wrote favorite animal panther. And the next day they had a panther for her to walk around on a leash. They're like, all right, we're getting a photo of that. She's like, what the hell? Another rumor, which was also absolutely not true, is that she was the love child of William Randolph Hearst and was named for his estate, San Simeon. Again, total bullshit. But at some point, she did bump into his son, maybe after her passed away or something, bumped into his son and he said, "Hiya, sis."
Wow. I mean, rumors, and again, this is like the 40s. Those Hollywood weird rumors were crazy. Written about in the rags, written about in the papers, the trade papers, and even the pictorial things were all sort of tabloid silliness. But I mean, that's part of the draw. That was part of the draw of the Hollywood life. Like, it's so glamorous and wild and crazy. Look at what kind of debauchery and just eccentricities that these stars have. But that's kind of wacky.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was born in France and had nothing to do with it. But
yes.
But yeah, I mean, I love her portrayal here. Obviously, she has an accent. I don't know if she's trying to do a Serbian accent, but you know,
yeah, it's tough to
who's
say.
going to know the difference between a French and a Serbian accent in 1940s America? I thought her portrayal was very good. You definitely see the sort of smoldering desire that's behind her eyes and her words, but you also see the restraint and fear that she has of herself. You know, she's constantly drawn back to the panther in the zoo. And there's an interesting point where she encounters the janitor or the groundskeeper at the zoo, who's, you know, gives her a big religious, you know, like how do you do, basically, and you know, thank the Lord and all this stuff, and then starts singing a tune. And you were telling me something about this. I was like, what?
yeah. So the tune he's singing is just a little work tune to keep himself occupied as he's cleaning up the big cat cages, and around there he's singing something like "Nothing else to do, nothing else to do." And it was apparently written by Bernard Herrmann for an earlier movie, The Devil and Daniel Webster, in which, among other things, Simone played a character called the Witch Girl. RKO was definitely a frugal studio. They would reuse as much as they could. And so in that case, they reused some music. That zoo set came from a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers musical. And I believe, and this is just my eye thinking this, it's also later used in A Holiday Affair with Robert Mitchum and Janet Leigh, which is one of my favorite Christmas movies. And then the biggest set, the most memorable, or one of the most memorable sets in this movie is the staircase it's a big spiraling staircase to Irena's apartment. And that is from the movie that just ended at RKO, Orson Welles' Magnificent Ambersons. That was the last movie that they did before a change of leadership at RKO, where they specifically wanted to distance themselves from the expensive genius of Orson Welles that they considered had left them pretty much a mess, and have came up with the slogan "showmanship instead of genius." And Val Lewton was hired to be the showman. And Val Lewton was hired to basically run a horror unit at RKO. And the horror unit, like, they gave him a title. They said, "We need a movie called Catpeople." And he's like, "All right." And he said to the writer when they got the title, he's like, "If you want to back out now, go with God." And the writer, DeWitt Bodine did not. He stuck around for it and came up with a heck of a script. But basically it was like the movies were made on a shoestring budget to compete with the Universal monster movies that would cost like 4 times as much. And they would have expensive makeup and bigger name actors. They were just more robust productions. And Val Lewton thought, we can get the same effect by using imagination more effectively and judiciously. And let's go with that. And so with Cat People, which was not a subject he chose, he adapted it to his own sensibilities in that he is both afraid of cats. He was also very, very uncomfortable being touched. And so you've got Irena right there. And he went from Cat People, they would give him another title. I Walked with a Zombie. He's like, "Oh, great. Let's do Jane Eyre with zombies." And
yeah.
He's
fascinating. He's a fascinating producer. as a producer, it is his responsibility to put together the production, all the people that work on that production to put that movie out. But he has a very unique stamp on a lot of these productions, more so than even the directors that he hires for this, because the directors are still kind of beholden to his decision making. So some of the choices that Jacques Tourneur, who's the actual director of this film, makes are because Val Lewton wanted that. And Val was like, I want it to look this way. I want you to do this. I want you to, add the scene or shoot the scene in this way. I want this edited this way. I want the music to do this. I want the sound to do that. And that's all part of his, sensibility, his aesthetic in getting those scares, getting the thrills and the tension through less costly means, but still using those cinematic tricks to get the result that he wants. And I think the biggest thing that he is known for in horror and probably, and beyond that, similar genre films is what's called the Lewton Bus. And this is one of the best scenes in this movie. Alice is being pursued. She doesn't know by whom. Something is following her, something that sounds like a cat. You hear the sort of distant growling. You hear padding and rustling bushes. But there's no other sound. There's no music. It's just her and her heels and sparsely lit sections of this underpass and the street that she's running through. And you just hear her just walking. The camera follows her exactly. And you hear the click, 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 click of her heels. And she stops every so often to look back and hear the rustling, and then she goes faster, and so you hear the click, 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 click more as she speeds up. And at one point, it seems to her that something is catching up to her, that something's just about to get her, and she looks back, and as she turns her head back to the right side of the screen, a bus out of nowhere just barrels in, huge sound, screeches to a halt. And the doors open, and it's the bus driver saying, "Hey, you need a ride, miss?" That's a jump scare. That is the jump scare. And it became known as the Lewton Bus, something that's so shocking and out of nowhere that usually arrives with a loud sound or something that is going to completely break the spell of whatever was happening on that screen up to that point, because everybody's being drawn in by the lack of sound, the tension. Something's happening. Something's coming from behind her. Oh, no, it's coming from front. And it's a bus, not a cat person. It's not anything attacking her. But that technique of just shattering tension with a whoa, out of nowhere surprise, that became what we now know as the jump scare. And he put that in a few other movies as well, and it became very well known as a technique. We use it a lot now, I think, in slasher movies, became popular in the 70s and 80s and 90s, those sort of shock moments, those jump out kind of moments. Something's very slow. Somebody's just walking around a corner and it's dark and all of a sudden something jumps out. And I love filmmakers today still make reference to it or homage to that very directly. And one of the favorite examples that I found was in Final Destination, the first one. There's a moment that's very famous where one of the kids gets smashed by a bus out of nowhere. She's in the middle of just a speech, and she turns around and gets plowed by a bus. There's an actual literal Lewton bus right there. And also the teacher of all the students in this film, her name is Mrs. Lewton. So they get Mrs. Lewton on camera there, standing on the corner, getting splashed by blood of the girl who gets hit by a literal bus. So there you go. There's the Lewton Bus moment of Final Destination. But the fact that 1942, he comes out with this thing, and here we are 80 plus years later, still using the same technique in different forms, still being referenced. And also, not that it's a horror movie, but Mean Girls does the same thing.
There you go.
So if you're watching Mean Girls and that part where Regina George is having an argument with Katie and steps off the curb, there's your Lewton Bus moment.
There you go. Oh, boy. Yeah, and so much of that technique, even the build up to that, is just her running from basically one pool of light to another.
Yeah.
Which was
beautiful.
Partially another practicality measure because it was filmed on a soundstage, which don't last forever. They're not infinite. So you cut and you can just move some of the dressing around each street light a little bit, and it's a new street light. And so there's that, and the pools of darkness really help in that. And he also uses darkness in the other really acclaimed scene in this is when Irena has followed Alice later on in the movie to either where she lives or her YWCA. But it's a pool in the basement where she is going to take a swim, and Irena follows and goes downstairs, and Alice hears something on the stairs. She's not sure, but there's a little cat that had come down with her and is scared of whatever is coming. And that like cats don't react well to Irena. We've established that earlier. And so she panics or thinks quickly, however you want to say it. But she takes off her robe, jumps into the pool, and sees a shadow just sort of circling the pool. And it's implied to be a panther. And you see the reflected shimmers of the water and the light in the water all over the ceiling and the walls of the swimming area. And eventually she loses it. She just starts screaming, and people run from downstairs. And then suddenly Irena is standing there in her fur coat and flicks on the light and says, "What's wrong? Are you scared? I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't mean to scare you.
I didn't mean to scare you. That's it."
And it is really such a great moment because everything's implied, and the camera takes Alice's POV a couple times, not in the strict literal sense where it's moving like in a shaky cam kind of way that a person's actual POV would be, but you see from the center of the pool looking out against the walls around, and you can't see anything in the corners. There's darkness there, and you can hear that there's something moving, and Alice is still at like, what's who's there, and you can almost see the form of a panther, but it could be your mind playing tricks because, I mean, obviously they're not having a panther walk around this pool because that would be too expensive of an effect.
That would be too expensive.
But there's, you're very much to, cinematographer's credit are being led to believe that there is something that you should be looking for.
Yeah.
And you should be able to see or at least glimpse. Yeah. And I love these techniques. Yeah. I love how it's born out of necessity and frugality, but I think that what you end up between Jacques Tourneur and Val Lewton's work together on this is you get some really great cinema without having to use, expensive tricks.
Yeah. So, yeah. This one was as simple as creating the shapes in the dark. Apparently Tourneur was like basically putting either his hand or a handkerchief in front of a light. It was just a matter of making a little bit more darkness in that area. And
very cool, very effective. And I love it. And that's like, to me, obviously the scariest moment was the Lewton Bus moment, just because and look, I'm in my 40s. I grew up with, if I was a black and white movie, it was probably kind of cheesy, or it was one of the 1930s classics. They didn't have jump scares in the Universal movie, the Universal monster movies. And I was not expecting something like that. And because my expectations were so out of whack, that shocked me. I actually did jump in my seat when seeing that. And I'm like, this is a 1942 movie. This shouldn't be doing this to me.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't even like a monster jumping out. It was a freaking bus.
Yeah. A completely innocent bus. And yet people were shrieking. People were shrieking in that movie there. Like the Great Train Robbery movie from silent movies where the train,
like, oh my gosh, it's coming at me.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I reacted the exact same way to seeing that as I did when I was watching the original Final Destination in the movie theater, sitting in the front row and having an entire movie theater shriek at the same time when Terry gets hit by the bus. And I'm like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But it came from 1942. It came from this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that brings me a lot of joy. So.
Yeah. I love seeing the nuts and bolts of things get made at an early point in cinema history that eventually get refined or get commented on in later movies, and this is just one of those foundational things. It's a foundational moment for horror movies, I think.
Yeah. And to anybody who's listening who's kind of like blah when it comes to black and white movies or older films like this, sometimes these kinds of classics can really surprise you. And I love having those moments. And I've mentioned it before on the show where I have some biases against certain eras, certain types of movies, certain studios, and just sort of think like, okay, I don't know too much about them, but I'm going to assume that it's going to be like this, and I'm going to, see it and just feel this way. Step out of those assumptions, man, and just try it, because like you might be surprised. I was surprised with this, and I love the Universal movies, the Universal monster movies, and this takes that idea of horror and plays it in a completely different way. And, again, thanks to Lewton and his, and his crew that he handpicked to work on this movie, to make something like this. But this is it's a unique experience, and it's definitely worth it, even, in a 21st century horror fans perspective. So, yeah. That's my 2 cents.
Oh, just wanted to point out a few of the cat-related imagery in this movie. Besides the actual, there's an actual panther and a tiger, I believe, but mostly a panther in the zoo. Panther's name is Dynamite. He's a pretty expressive guy. There is the statue of King John holding the sword with the impaled panther. There's 2 things. There seems to be a screen with kind of an Art Deco panther that Irena has in her apartment that is, I'm not sure if it's a dressing screen, like you'd change behind it, or whether it is just something she has over her window to sort of dim the light a little bit, soften the light as she draws, because she is also an artist for fashion magazines.
Which again, that's a really cool occupation that they have for her, like a really cool career.
Yeah.
A fashion designer from Serbia. It's so exotic, so chic.
Yeah. One thing I heard was that Val Lewton preferred to give as many characters as he had, like give them jobs. He wanted to ground them in the real world and be like, this isn't just a pretty foreign girl. This is a girl who works for a living. She has a job. She's a professional.
She's making good money. That apartment cannot have been cheap in the 40s. Yeah. It was beautiful.
Yeah. To the point where pretty much Oliver moves in with her, doesn't he?
Yeah. It's her place. He moves into her place. He probably lives in a dump, making whatever he does as a draftsman,
She has a painting with some cats in the painting. There's a point later where Dr. Judd tells her to take the cat imagery down from her apartment and everything, and that will help her deal with what he believes to be her psychosis. And she does that, and she's like setting up a nice meal for Oliver when Oliver finally says, "No, we've got to talk. I'm going to give you a divorce, and I'm going to go off with Alice." And then things start.
That's when it goes straight towards the roller coaster ride of the end.
Yeah. But there's a point where, right before she's stalking Alice through the underpass, she's in front of a flower shop. And there's tiger lilies in the window of the flower shop, apparently. Yeah. So it's like that sort of detail. There's another point where they're in a museum and they're looking at a model ship, because Alice and Oliver are draftsmen for a shipbuilding company. And the figurehead on the ship is a panther. And it's in a museum, and in a really lousy move, Oliver and Alice say, "Why don't you go look at something else? I'm sure you're bored with all these ships." And she's like, "I want to be with you." And they're like, "We just don't want you to be bored." That's being a bad husband.
Yeah, pretty much.
But then she walks out of the museum, and it feels like they wanted a statue of Bast for her to walk past. and they
Maybe.
couldn't get that, and they got a statue of Anubis. It's like, well, it's an animal head. It has ears. It's a little cat-like, but it's a jackal. And just with her fur, with and also just some of her expressions. There's a scene where she has a canary, a pet canary, and she's reaching into the bird cage, and her face looks so much like a kitten just playing. It's a very curious, playful face, and then suddenly the bird gets frightened to death and dies, and she realizes the power she had, and it's a sad moment. But that's another point where it's just like I really feel for her there. It's such an innocent gesture to go in for that bird, but it's also instinctual. She's being drawn to it in a way that she doesn't completely understand, almost, it seems.
Right. She's drawn to that. She's drawn to the panther, obviously. She's drawn to Dynamite. But when she finally, at the end, when she lets Dynamite out, he leaps at her. It's kind of implied that he's attacked her, and then runs off. She's drawn to him, but he is definitely not drawn to her.
Yeah. Well,
because she's, unfortunately, she's a cursed being. She's not fully human. She's also not fully a panther, not fully a cat, and that kind of dooms her, and she ends up dying. I mean, she does die at the end. Oliver and Alice walk by and are like, dead cat that just got hit by a taxi over there, and then here's Irena. That's so sad. And
that is like it's left almost ambiguous. You can pretty much just see her coat almost covering her, whether she is a human or a cat at the end. Because like Oliver says, the last thing he says is, she never lied to us. It was, she did. And there's a scene where she speaks with Dr. Judd at the zoo at some point, where a scene from a few lines from the script that were cut, where she describes her mother dying. And she says, as she died, I could feel the fur on her hands. I could feel like pads develop on her hands. And then like the village came and they saw the thing in the bed, and it's like, and that the idea that she would turn finally to a cat after death, it could be implied at the end, but they did take that out. They did take that out of the script. They took a few things from what I understand out of the script. There was a preview scene where Nazis came into her village. I don't think Irena was supposed to be in the village at the time, but cat people drove Nazis out of the Serbian village.
Interesting.
And that's nowhere in this movie. That I can't even conceive of that really being in this movie. But that was...
No, that probably would have been like timeline-wise and historically very inaccurate. I think what gets cut out of a movie can sometimes be unfortunate, but I think here, there's a lot more implied situations. I like that that's kept secret. It's kept ambiguous.
So do I.
It's kept sort of subtle in many ways, because
there
are the few moments where it's not subtle, I think really stand out, because up to now it's been kind of questioned. We're watching a horror movie. We know that she's going to turn into a cat person at some point. But when it happens and how it happens is very well done. I do appreciate that.
And they play that so close to the vest. It seems like laying that all on the table in the first scene just isn't with the spirit of the movie. It was a very good cut that they made that, if it existed. That was something that was mentioned. I should mention where a lot of my information came from, the commentary on the Criterion Cat People Blu-ray. And it's a commentary from 2005 from Gregory Mank, film historian. Yeah.
That's, and that is one of the things that I know when doing research on this, that the Criterion Collection version of this is just definitive. And of course, Criterion puts out some amazing stuff. So, physical media, yay. If you are going to own a copy of this movie and want the best, the best of what's available, absolutely go for the Criterion Collection version of the Blu-ray, Blu-ray/DVD.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for
sure thing.
bringing this movie to us, because
Sure.
I'm like, again, I'm super grateful, because I probably would not have watched this on my own
Yeah.
if we weren't going to talk about it, and I'm very grateful that you
Oh, good.
want to talk about so I could see it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad I could introduce it to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
You've just listened to another episode of The Bear Cave of Terror. And if you haven't seen the original Catpeople from 1942, or after listening to us are struck with an irresistible compulsion to watch it again, it is available for purchase or rent on Amazon, Fandango at Home, Apple TV, and other streaming services that offer video on demand. It is not streaming for free, unfortunately, anywhere. But I would recommend, if you're into physical media, to check out the beautiful reissue by Criterion Collection. Also, Rob has told me that it is in frequent rotation on Turner Classic Movies, or TCM, if you have cable. So if you do have cable, check it out. You might come across it airing at some point. But Rob, if listeners would like to get in touch, how would they do that?
Probably the best way is Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky at robstaeger.bsky.social. And I will talk about movies and gripe about politics and all sorts of stuff.
Well, as you should on Blue Sky, to be honest, as you should. And if you would like to follow the Bear Cave of Terror, we are also on Blue Sky and Instagram at Bear Cave of Terror, all one word, or you can send an email to bearcaveofterror@gmail.com. A list of sources will be available in the show notes if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Catpeople, or possibly the films touched by Val Lewton. And remember, if you run afoul of Serbian fashion designers late at night at your local YWCA, make sure to keep a few cheroos in your pocket. You'll thank me later. Good night, everybody.
Animals are ever so psychic. There are some people who just can't come in here. My dear brother's wife, for instance. She's a very nice girl. I've got nothing against her, but you just should see what happens when she puts her foot inside this place. The cats particularly. They seem to know. You can fool everybody. But landy dearie me, you can't fool a cat. They seem to know who's not right, if you know what I mean.